shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolute.
Hello everyone, and welcome back into the GSMC Dead Ball Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. And for our third segment of today's show, we're going to be concluding our MLB top fives with the relief pitchers, one of my favorite positions in baseball, just because you have to back up your starting pitcher. And if you don't have a good bullpen, or at the very least an elite relief pitcher to close games out, then I don't know what to think of your team, because that's what you need to have to truly win games in the MLB. And these guys, this top five specifically, have proven that in spades. Even for teams that are not necessarily going to contend this year, there are still elite players. Without further ado, let's jump right into it. Starting off at number 5, Mason Miller, of one of those teams who are not going to contend next year, but maybe are on the precipice of contending in what could be a very volatile AL West over the next couple of years. Mason Miller of the Oakland A's. And here's the thing. What I love about Mason Miller is that he's still young, still someone who can grow in this Oakland A's team. And as they move to Las Vegas, he's someone who brings a lot of upside and hope, and most importantly, optimism to that move. He is someone that, even though does not necessarily play the sexiest position, and in my opinion isn't as yet as big a star as a guy like Brenton Rooker or Shea Langoliers, in my opinion, who are still in their own right, not necessarily high-profile MLB stars, but probably the bigger ones on the team. Miller is someone who does the important job, being able to win you games by closing in spectacular fashion. 35.6% K rate, only a 5.9% walk rate, ranks among the top 5 in the MLB in terms of those very important stats for a reliever. And what I love about this Oakland move to Las Vegas, even though it's going to piss off a lot of fans, I think that it allows them to find a foundation in where young guys like Miller can be the faces of your team, even in terms of the positions they play. Because chances are you would never want a reliever to be as high profile as, say, your designated hitter or power hitting center fielder, but that's what Mason Miller can be. And I don't necessarily think the Oakland A's are a team that are designed to win with power, right? They're designed to win by being able to close out games defensively, and Mason Miller is a big part of that. So even though they might be a couple of years from true contention, and they'll never contend to the point where they're going to be a team that score a lot of runs, have a number of power hitters in their lineup, Mason Miller is going to be the face of this franchise. That's why he's at number 5. And he very well could be, over the next couple of years, the number 1 reliever when everything is said and done. But I just want to showcase him now when we're a little bit more iffy about Oakland and their transition to Las Vegas. And then, when the move to Las Vegas is complete and Mason Miller's much more elite than he already is, that's when we start to consider him as one of the league's elite relievers. So at number 5, he will remain for now. Then at number 4, one of the great relievers in the MLB at the current moment. I'm sad he's doing it with Cleveland. Emmanuel Clase. Emmanuel Clase, it was painful to see him go as a Texas Rangers fan a couple of years ago, but kudos to him, man, because he went to Cleveland, found a situation that allowed him to grow into the team and allowed Cleveland to assume a nice identity of an elite defensive team that has elite closers. Still one other closer to talk about on this list from Cleveland, so this goes to show how elite they've built up their bullpen. But Clase especially is someone who I truly regard as someone to really define the relief pitching role of the next couple of years. Maybe not as much as Mason Miller will, because he's a little bit older than him, and who knows, maybe Cleveland regresses to the mean a little bit. I don't necessarily think that their style of play is sustainable in terms of being a true contender in the AL year in, year out, but they are in the weakest AL division, so anyone can win in that regard. But Emmanuel Clase gives them a shot each and every single year. He actually is the one who was the one with the 35.6% K rate and 5.9% walk rate. I wrote my notes a little bit differently. And going back to Mason Miller, he's just someone who really excelled and might have exceeded the stat lines of Emmanuel Clase in terms of his own strikeout rate at 41.4%, but I wanted to correct that. But still, Emmanuel Clase, even though in terms of stats, a guy like Mason Miller's catching up to him a little bit, he still can perform at an elite level. Now, he might likely be someone who could drop out of these rankings just because, A, he's aging a little bit, and B, I don't necessarily know if Cleveland is going to stick around as a top contender, but just because of his arsenal, that's the reason to believe that he is someone who is not going to go down easily in terms of his regression. So Emmanuel Clase is at number 4 right now, in my opinion. Then, let's talk about Mr. Ryan Helsley, someone who's been consistent for another team that I feel is not going to contend as much this year in St. Louis, a team with way too many questions to determine, but Ryan Helsley has locked it down for them last year. Truly incredible year. 66.1 innings pitched, 2.04 ERA, 79 Ks, 40 saves overall. And most impressive stat to back that up is that he has 3 straight sub 2.5 ERA seasons. I believe 2 of them have come in the last 4 years. And so that's reason to believe that even though St. Louis is not necessarily looking like the most promising team, middling farm system, too many questions about contract situations in the infield, especially with Nolan Arenado, but having an elite closer, at the very least in this lineup, to kind of offset all the noise surrounding this Cardinals team, leads me to believe that Ryan Helsley doesn't care if the Cardinals are a contender. He might end up elsewhere in years' time. He, as well as Emmanuel Clase, are not necessarily going to stick around as long as, say, a Mason Miller to see if they can rise up these rankings, but he is someone who fits in perfectly as the middle player in this list just because he's someone who's inoffensive and just gets the job done for a decent team and not a solid team. So that's why Ryan Helsley, in my opinion, sits at number 3. Just because St. Louis could be good this year, but I'm not necessarily counting on it. So that's why Ryan Helsley is done in a little bit. And so that just goes to show how seriously I'm taking the relief pitching right now. Because it's tough, because there are a lot of elite guys on these squads. It's just that their squads don't do much for them to bolster support as their cases for being some of the best relievers in the sport rise. And that's why Ryan Helsley, even though some could say he could regress because the St. Louis Cardinals are regressing, should be acknowledged before that eventually happens. So I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt here. Then let's talk about the second Cleveland Guardians, reliever in this list, Cade Smith, someone who has a 37% K rate over 4 years, 2 in the last 4, 2 above, I don't know what I wrote here, 2 above 40 as well over the past couple of years. So Cade Smith is really someone who I think is going to usurp Emmanuel Clase as the best, most elite Cleveland Guardians reliever, and potentially already has. But still, like I said before, both of these guys highly depend on this Cleveland Guardians team's propensity to play high-end defense. And so, if they come into the games and they have a comfortable lead, then chances are we might not necessarily understand how great they are. But these two guys are predicated on only coming in with 1-run leads, 2-run leads at that, and holding it down. If that's how the Cleveland Guardians play, then maybe we get to see a couple more years of these guys' greatness. but chances are that style of play is going to regress over the next coming years as the league transcends into a league predicated on power. And so guys like Clase and Smith might not project as much as others on this list. So Cade Smith right now is my number 2 reliever on this list. And overall, someone who, at least for the time being, will project to be one of the elite relievers in the game. And he's proven it over the past couple of years. But now we have to look ahead to the long-term future, to how the MLB can change, and most importantly, how relievers are going to be viewed. So Cade Smith for now, but maybe not for later. But someone who I still think is going to stick around, even though he hasn't necessarily had the most postseason success. He is just someone who needed that culture change, in my opinion. Devin Williams, moving from Milwaukee to New York, gives him an opportunity to right the wrongs of recent years with Milwaukee in the postseason. That's his only kind of blemish on his resume. And he is someone who's still in the 98th, 99th percentile in terms of K rate, whiff rate, what have you. But ultimately, what I want to see out of him, we'll talk about this later in my last segment of today's show, is how he translates to this Yankees culture. Because the Yankees are going to demand a lot out of him. He, for now, ultimately projects as their number 1 reliever. And he's going to be tasked with closing out a lot of close games, not just in the regular season, but in the postseason as well. So if he's up for it, then I think that he will have a very nice career in New York. But this is highly different from the stake that he had in Milwaukee, because he could be forgiven at the very least in Milwaukee, not in New York. So that's what he's facing right now, and I wish good luck to him, because I think he is still the number 1 reliever and number 1 closer in the MLB. But New York is a different breed. And if you can't ultimately affiliate and ingratiate yourself to this roster, to this team, to this fan base, then you're in for a very rough ride. So you better bring it, Devin Williams, and prove that you're still the number 1 reliever. But that's my list for now. And coming up next, we'll be talking about 2 teams, the Mets and the Yankees, that potentially win it all in 2025. I'm going to talk about the challenges, though, that they might face, but also the powers and positives they bring to their lineups and the reasons, ultimately, why I think this way. Right back after this short break to talk about the Mets first.